Now we are live. So thank you, Karen, for yet again saving my communication mess up. So we've been sat talking for 10 minutes where interestingly, I was like, are we live? Because normally you get a red box and there was no red box. So apologies for anyone who's been sat waiting for us. We have a communication fail in that.
Or a technology fail.
Well, we were just communicating to each other, but not outwardly. I'm happy to own that again. So we'll start afresh. So starting from the top, because we've already gone through this. We're going to do a quick introduction. So I'm Cheryl Thompson. I'm a leadership coach. I'm sure some of you already know me because you're on my profile page anyway. Why communication matters to me? It matters because I think it underpins every single thing that you do in every aspect of your life. And sorry, I'm just seeing the more comments come through going, was it me? Sorry, everyone. Thank you. Karen, could you just step in as our communications manager?
We'll make sure it's worth your while. Extra value.
We'll get, so the introductions I'm going to do quickly. You know who I am. I'm a leadership coach. I do lots of communications. Some of it doesn't go live. Over to you, Emma.
Hi, I'm Emma Matthews. Title says Burnout and Performance Coach. And I had a long career in the financial services industry, similar to you, Cheryl. Yeah. And actually about a decade of that, I was formerly in corporate communications roles. And then I was responsible for teams of people as well. So I've seen communication at kind of world-class, absolute best level, but also abysmally poor level as well. So it's definitely something that, you know, when communication isn't working, you will feel it painfully. So I think that's a good bridge, Cheryl, then into what poor
we were talking about.
Yeah, which we had a beautiful conversation about.
No, you've all missed out. So brilliant segue, actually. And what we wanted to talk about specifically in this part is, how do you know that it's not working for you? So how do we know if communication is failing us, apart from Karen telling us that it's failing us?
Yeah. So I'll chip in there. I think for me, big signs, red flags that you've got an issue are within your team, your workplace. There's loads of examples of mismatched expectations. Perhaps you're the leader who's briefed your team on a project. What you get back isn't what you thought you'd asked for. It's not the timing's not right, the quality's not right. There's a sense of frustration, perhaps in the team or between two individuals. Trust starts breaking down, and just generally there's poor delivery or clients are not happy. All of these are signs of poor communication.
And I think because what you described there are tangible outputs of poor communication, so consequences of it with the quality of the work and the feelings. I think there's the states of mind of poor communication as well. So how individuals feel. So if you've got two people that are poorly communicating with one another, I would say both of you know it, but let's say sometimes it's one more than the other. But I assume if I'm feeling something's not working, normally the person on the receiving end of it feels like it's not working too. So I think the states of feeling frustrated. One of the things I often felt with poor communication is sometimes I'd sit there and think, am I speaking another language? Because I'm sure we're speaking the same language, but I don't seem to be getting heard. So you almost start to feel silenced or ignored, or like when you walk into a room, somebody's got their hands over their ears because you can't get your message heard from the other person. And that really starts to stick, and it starts to physically and emotionally cut, in my opinion anyway, and certainly in my experience, in my own personal experience. So I think if you're ever walking through sort of work or life or whatever, and when you have an interaction with somebody or several people, and you have any feelings like that, where you don't feel comfortable, you don't feel respected, heard, or seen, there's a likely communications issue. And I think to identify it, first of all, is a really important thing, because otherwise you feel like you are isolated. So that's where I'd start off with, how does it feel? I think then, just if you don't mind me looping back to what you said, Emma, I think just because one of the things that I felt with any of my coaching clients, and when I was working within financial services with a communications issue, is you don't get what you want or what you ask for. So it's what you were saying about quality of work or delivery time scales. It's your expectations go unmet. So you say X, Y, and Z, and you get A, B, and C. So there's a tangible, clear, obvious, these things don't match. And it's horrible because there was something that you said that was really brilliant.
I know what it is.
But no one else heard apart from me. You and I want you to say it because it was so wonderful about how you took the emotion out of the aligning of communication, the expectation.
Yeah. So
do you want me to say it if you can't remember?
I know what you're talking about. So in the context of there's a communication process, let's, for argument's sake, you're the leader, you're briefing something into your team in an environment of everyone's a bit overwhelmed, there's so many competing communications. A really effective technique to make sure that your message has been heard in the way that you had intended it is just to ask the individual that you're communicating with or the team, what have they heard? What is their understanding of the conversation that you've just had or the project that's been briefed in, and have them replay that back to you. Mm-hmm. That will not only tell you if they've got the facts, the factual content, but quite often things like their tone of voice, their body language will tell you so many things about how they're feeling about that communication as well.
And if you don't mind me taking it further to something else that you said that was brilliant in the same line, it's when you not only said, what have you heard, but it was the way you leveled it was, it's not, you essentially were saying, I haven't spoken incorrectly and you haven't misheard. So it's the way you delivered that. Can we just talk about what you've heard to make sure that you said it in much better words than I did the first time around when no one else was here.
Yeah, about the intention. Have they understood the intention?
Yeah. But sorry, I'm belaboring this point and I'm not doing it very well. My communication's lacking here. It was mainly, it was more about there being no blame in the communication. So that was the bit. So it's not saying that's not what I said. And it's not the other person going, that's not what I heard. It's saying, let's make sure that we've understood each other. Yeah. So I just think that's a really beautiful way of doing it, because the thing is with poor communication or challenging or conflict communication, it becomes emotive and it almost becomes accusatory, where we're pointing a finger at somebody. Well, that's not what you said to me last week, or no, that's exactly what you asked for. And if we and then we get into a conflict communication, which is somewhere we don't want to be. So to do it the way you're describing, where you just reflect back and say, let's make sure we're on the same page, and can you just repeat back to me what you think that we're doing here, or or when we're going to do it by, or who is it? It's more about asking asking questions before you all exit in different ways to make sure you're all delivering to the same spec. And I think that was just a really nice way of doing it, which you
And it's particularly, I think, important. So there's the kind of getting work done context to that piece, but also if you're giving developmental feedback as well, that is such a good technique to use. How has the individual taken that message in the spirit that it was intended? Given that we're all individuals with different triggers and we've got different filters on the world, actually, have you come together and developed a shared understanding, or are you walking away triggered?
And that's another way, another segue into another thing that I wanted to talk about was we were talking about the different ways of being able to communicate. So especially now we're in a more Zoom environment, and I think like more people are going back into the office, but we're all working to sort of slightly different agendas with what our needs are and how we need to communicate. There's so many different methods to be able to communicate, although I think most people do this these days, where sometimes like a phone call might be good enough or an email, but there's so many different communication channels. It's knowing which one to pick for the right outcome. And that's not necessarily for your right outcome. I mean, your right outcome should be speak to be understood, to be heard and understood. But if you're trying to have a communication or a conversation with somebody, you've got to think about their needs. So your audience's needs. And I think that's something significant that we could talk about here, knowing when is the right time to have a conversation, considering your audience, knowing what channel is the right one to do, knowing what your audience's challenges are around being able to communicate. And if you genuinely want to be heard and understood, you facilitate those needs. But often we go into these conversations expecting, we almost go in going, I need to be heard. Well, you might be heard, but you won't be understood unless you consider the person sat across from you's needs and requirements as well. What do you think?
I love that. And what immediately springs to mind is I have a client who is beautiful in how she communicates with me in this context. So she will pop up there's an app that we use called Telegram, and she'll just say, I've been thinking about this. I want to plant a seed with you. And then I know you'll come back to me after you've thought about it with something that's brilliant. So that is her, we'll call her Susan, springing up and just really understanding how I love to be communicated with, because I won't necessarily be that person that in the moment has an amazing all singing, all dancing communication or response to it, but actually give me time to go walk with the dog or do something that just gets my creative juices flowing, then I'll come back with something amazing. So
I'm in love with Susan. I love that way. I think that's so insightful. And, you know, it reminds me of a manager I had actually at the Financial Ombudsman. And I think there's some people on here from the Ombudsman, so they'll know this man that I'm talking about. And he was such a busy man because everyone loved him. And everyone used to want some of his time. I may have told you this before as well, Emma, but for everyone else's benefit. And I remember I would email him and we'd sit not far from each other, so I could see all the people coming in and out of his desk. And I thought, I wonder where my email is in his like list of emails. So one day we got talking about this, that I'd emailed him and it took a while to hear back. And he said, and it was a really good lesson. He said, do you know what you need to do, Cheryl? He said, I've got so much rubbish in my emails. He said that take me forever to get through it. He said, if it's urgent, and we had a whole conversation of what urgent meant to him compared to what urgent meant to me, because that's another thing, defining your terminology as well. He said, right, get a Post-it note. I mean, this is old school. Write it on it and put it on my laptop. He says, and I'll see that and I'll prioritize that over everything else. Because so essentially what it was learn my communication style. If you want, and I must have jumped the gear on so many things. I mean, that sounds really naughty, but it enabled me to get into the way he thought. And then I was heard and responded to because I adapted to who he was, just like Susan has adapted to you in this scenario. Susan, who's not really called Susan. But it is that thing, isn't it? It's about learning your audience's needs. It's so much more beneficial if you do that.
And those exercises you can do, you've just taken me back to a time when I ran a communications team, and we actually did an exercise that was around different people's communication preferences. So am I someone that you can just stop by my desk and have a chat, or do you need to book an appointment with me? Do I just need the facts, or do you need to take me along the journey? That was such a fun exercise that I would really recommend to teams. It's just the level of connection that you develop from those kinds of conversations in itself improves communication, because there's a deeper level of trust
and respect.
Yes,
because essentially, and it's sort of jumping slightly out, but that's telling somebody what your boundaries are and allowing them to be able to respect your boundaries by knowing what your preferences and style is. And that's huge. And that doesn't even have to be complicated to be able to do that exercise. Justin is, I think everybody can tell I'm a chatter. That's who I am, I chat. However, in a work environment, when I was certainly doing within financial services, I used to sit with my team and we almost had like a grading system of priority. So things that would stop the program running, like in its spot, like literally there, dead in its heels. If you didn't get this information to me, all things would break. And we had a way of being able to communicate the severity of something through it. And we did that as a whole like function, how we would communicate back and forward with each other and what commitment we made to each other. And if I was out of the office in London doing X, what my availability was. So to be as transparent as possible about your availability. And also, and actually it ties into what Karen's just said there about the terminology of your written communication. I don't know about you, Emma, but I was all over the country. So a lot of my communication was written. So what I did up front was I'd say to my team, they know me, I'm chatty and I'm friendly. But if I'm ever sharp and quick, the type of person I am is if there's a problem, I'll tell you. So if I'm sharp and quick, it's because I'm running to a meeting. So I would never have wanted somebody to be sat in an office going, oh God, Cheryl was really like blunt then and just answered in one word, because that's not my, that you can see that's not me. So I'd be like, you have to build relationships with people so that they know you and that they can trust you, and that you have to signpost your communication. So it's communicating about communicating. But I used to say to my team, if you want my attention, you get it in the first line, otherwise you've lost me, because I've got a million other emails. So tell me what you want, first line of the email. You can be pleasant and nice, and like at the very end go, and by the way, hope you're well, hope that you get out on time, but tell me what you want first row, because I've got so much to do, and it's not me being rude, it's just I want to be able to serve you as quickly and as efficiently as possible. So, but it's that thing, communicate about your communication.
Yeah, 100%. For me, it was always, if it's important, send me a text to alert me that there's an email, because at one point in my career, no joke, I'd get about 300-400 emails a day. It became impossible to get through them. So there had to be that emergency route. Now I'm a big fan of the voice message on an app, actually, as you've experienced with me.
Yeah, but it's but again, it's just, I'm saying the same thing, but it is communicating about your communication. So have a system in place, build a schema, know what that is. Whenever I started a new project with new people, or a new client, or a new company, whatever it was, and a new relationship, let's just say that, one of the first things I used to sit down and do was work out our communication strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean it had to be overly complex. People might start going, what do you mean a communication strategy? It was just, how do we communicate with each other so we all get what we want in a timely manner and in a respectful way? How do we get to know each other and learn each other? And so often I see people join, and I mean seniority as well, people that you think have done this a few times over, but people join and they almost shortchange on that starting point. They go in and they communicate to people, and that teaches people how they communicate. And if you're busy or rushed or then you might be communicating the wrong things. You might be creating the wrong boundaries and tolerances within your team. So you have to mindfully build this communication strategy. And it doesn't have, like I say, you can sit down for an hour and just, like you mentioned, the techniques where you understand how best to alert people and how best to respond. And I've got somebody who actually should be on this, who should have joined us in the audience today, and I hope she'll know I'm talking about her. But the point where you said about, can you stop by my desk? So despite her having something that says she's busy, and that's her boundary, people just ignore it and open her door and knock on it, because she's essentially allowed the boundary to think that they can communicate with her on their terms rather than on her terms. And that sounds really like a oppressive thing to say, on my terms and not your terms, but their boundaries, their communication boundaries that everyone benefits from. So it's almost like, how do you then step back, wind back that, and reinstate these communication boundaries so that everybody knows where they stand? And that's about you talking about it and being able to explain the why this matters. It's not because I'm too busy to hear you. It's because I can help you better if I've got this, and this. So it's about being able to show how everybody benefits from better communication.
Yeah, I love that. My mind was going there as well. Just find the win-win, because there's always a win-win.
Always. Oh, you just need to ask yourself some more questions. And I suppose that's what our job is, being able to drill several layers deeper than what, people often stop at answer 1 or 2, don't they? Whereas we go much deeper than that to get to the actual crux of the matter. And then you're actually dealing with the root cause communication issue rather than the surface level one. But it's always there.
And I think the more senior you get, the more people that you're responsible for, the more you need actual communication processes in place to make sure messages are getting out, particularly if you lead leaders as well, because there's generally still a place for you to have a voice that reaches everyone, whether it's then you're doing the town halls or the live calls, etc. There needs to be more of a process around it. Otherwise, communication is always the thing that gets forgotten, and it's actually the most important thing.
Yeah. And I think when you're talking about what you're talking about just there, so the town halls or the bigger communication, so one person speaking out, something that I've often found with those things, and I'm going to be tentative here, is it's almost like the communicator, the person responsible, sometimes can lose touch with, again, the audience. I don't know if you've ever noticed this. And I've seen it from both sides, where there's almost like a detachment because somebody's communicated at, they've just spoken at. And communication isn't just words. It's not just the words we use. It's trying to understand. I know I keep saying it, but understand your audience. It's, guess what? I think that's really important. Understand what they need from it. But also being able to read the room and sense the room. And I think, you and I have talked about this, Emma. Maybe that's quite and when I say feminine, I don't just mean women. I mean, because both men and women have feminine aspects to them and strategies. But I think trying to understand your audience and trying to hear what they've got to say so you communicate in the right way is more of a feminine leadership rather than masculine. Masculine's more, I've got this to do and I want to achieve it in this logical, ordered way, which is necessary. But sometimes you have to feel what people need as well and read between the lines, because communication not only is what we say, it's what we don't say.
Yeah. And what comes up for me then is the fact that it needs to be two-way. And the more senior you get, you need to make sure you've got those pathways to the real stuff getting to you. Whether it's, well, it depends on the scale of the organisation, but sometimes people use surveys, focus groups, literally getting out of ivory tower head office, spending time at grassroots level. All of those things have their place.
And it takes me back to the comment Karen said, which I've just put back up there. So often we think communication is just about speaking. It's listening, being able to, and listening with the right intention. So listening to hear, not listening to respond. So many people I've encountered listen just so they can come back with something. And I think something you said earlier about your Susan, who plants a seed for you to essentially percolate on that and come back. Sometimes we can communicate, and the right thing to do is to communicate, create space, and not expect anything in return immediately. Say, I'm going to leave that one with you. So it doesn't force the other person to feel like they have to have an answer for you, which is exactly what you mentioned with the Susan example. But as leaders, we can do that too. We don't have to have the answer for everything in the moment. We can hear. And I think that's a real humble approach to leadership as well, not having to know everything all the time and being vulnerable and strong enough to show that.
And that's the brilliant thing, actually, when you are a leader and if you've got a team. Actually, I loved the fact that there were, across my remit, there were people who were more expert in each of the detailed areas than me, and loved leaning on that. It actually takes the pressure off that you don't have to have all the answers.
Oh God, yeah. So being able to say my answer used to be, that's not a me answer, that's a you answer, and bring people in, because why have incredible people around you if you don't use them? But do you mind if I just look at what Luke?
No, I love it. Let's go for it.
So I'll read it out. So, do you think as part of that strategy, you should also discuss your style of communication? So beyond the communication strategy, for example, I tend to respond in one-word answers on emails. And so I'm not being rude, but he gets 300 to 400 emails a day. Not setting this could find the recipient feeling negative because of that style. Luke, that's exactly it. And I don't know if you missed this, but I mentioned that's what I used to do. So if I knew I had a really busy day and I was out of the office in London, I would say to my team, if I send one-word answers, it's because I'm running between meetings. It's not because I'm being short with you or because I've got nothing more to say. I'm not annoyed at you for anything. I mean, they know that anyway, because they know if I was annoyed, I'd just tell them. But sometimes if somebody's like a really gregarious person and they sort of shut down almost, you think, oh, have I done something to offend them? So yes, communicate that upfront at the outset, and it just removes the fear from people or the anxiety from them. So yes, Luke, I think that is perfect. And I also think to do that, you you're sharing who you are, so you're creating safety for people, but you're also being flexible because that might change. One day, or can you imagine if suddenly you're like more than one word answers because you had a free a day? I'm not saying that'd ever happen, but you have to sort of almost adapt to who you are to be able to say, today, this is how I am and where I am, and show your visibility for what you're doing. But it's communicating up front. Emma, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, it shows a level of self-awareness, doesn't it? If you have that conversation and a respect for others, that you care that they get the intention behind how you're communicating, because actually you've got a really busy workload and you're showing respect by coming back to them, but the reality is you don't have all the time in the world. So, and I think people get that, particularly the more senior you get, that time becomes more and more precious.
But I also think it means that people then can respect your time better as well, because if you put something like what Luke's saying, I mean, I could almost imagine that as part of your your email signature, where people say, these are my working hours, they don't have to be yours. Luke's could be, I'm responding in one word answers because I'm mega busy, whatever. But what I mean is then if I got that back from Luke where it was like, no, and then I got the clarification that that's why, I'd think, well, at least now I can respect Luke's parameters and his boundaries, and I won't just go to him for something that I didn't need to go to him for. So it sort of creates a trust and a transparency.
Yeah.
By the way, Jackie's just, I'm going to put it up here, Jackie's just brought something up that I actually wanted to bring up anyway, because this sort of really is really important to me. So Jackie's talked about listen, hear, and being aware of your body language, especially your face. Jackie and I used to work together, so she knows like my face. So I think you've got to know your own face to be aware of your face, as silly as that may sound. So somebody might think they've got a really great poker face and they haven't. So when somebody's communicating something to them and they could be sort of like, and you think, you're telling me everything. And your body, so how you're sat or and all of those things are leaking information. And it's actually something we've been touching on earlier anyway, where if you're not fully immersed in the communication, you can look distracted. So we all know with Zoom, you can be working as well as on a Zoom meeting. And I've observed meetings as part of my coaching work where I've got people, like all the squares. And as I'm literally there to observe how they interact as a team. And I think, I wonder if they realize how disinterested they seem in each other. And it's because they're all working. They're all doing other things that they're not, there'll be 10 people doing whatever. And there's always one person that's really engaged and the rest aren't. And that might not be a problem as long as you all know what the meeting's for, you know what you're turning up for, and you all respect each other. But it could be a problem one day. So it's about knowing how you appear to other people and how you present to other people and making a decision. Is that how you want to? So the reality of what you do, are you comfortable that that's what you're putting out into the world? And if you were on the receiving end of you, how would you feel?
Yeah, and that's where I think feedback really is helpful, actually. If you've got colleagues that you can trust to just tell you like it is, because I think kind of midpoint of my corporate career, someone told me, and I was forever grateful for this feedback, that my thinking face can sometimes look like violent disagreement. So I'm there thinking, but the message that I am sending out at that time, transmitting without intention, was, I don't think this is a good idea.
And isn't that funny? Because I think you've also got to think about where you're at as well. I think a lot of people are suffering from emotional burnout and professional burnout right now. People are more tired than they've ever been. And I suppose when I think about back to the time where I suffered burnout, and then I think about my face in meetings, I mean, I was pure cynicism. In some of them, I was angry, and my face showed it. So I almost think that, if you ever had that if I had a superpower, mine would be to turn like the room into snow or ice when I'm angry, and sunshine and daisies when I'm not. And that's something that I've got to be conscious of, because if I'm feeling under pressure or something, and I was, because I was close to burnout, that comes out to other people, and then Are you being the best leader you can be in that situation? And the answer is you're doing your best you can with what you've got, but you need to go and get help. But just know that everything that we do in terms of the words that we use, the words that we don't use, the body language, the facial expressions, the communication channels we pick, it's all teaching and it's all communicating something. You've just got to decide whether you're comfortable with what you're communicating. And that's a dangerous one. You see that face there, that looked like violent disagreement, but I think that's just your thinking face.
Yeah. It's what resonated for me there was just almost the world of overwhelm at the moment. And sometimes when you think about communication, there is so much to think about that you can lose yourself in the process and forget, actually, who am I? What's authentic to me? And that's important as well. Actually being yourself as well as being intentional about what you're communicating, thinking about your audience. You've also got to be yourself. So, for example, with me, I am not the happy clappy one. If suddenly I was in a day of Zoom meetings where I was playing that kind of really overly excited, energetic, I would be, I'd have nothing to give by the end of the day. So authenticity is key.
Yes, it is. And sorry, just to bring up what Jackie's just said there. So nothing worse than turning up to Zoom or someone's desk to see them tapping away and making the noises like, yeah, that's like, I'll just leave, shall I? Yeah, it completely shuts down the communication. And I think there's an interesting one there because, and I don't know if we've mentioned this because now my head's getting blurred about what we said on our silent one where we were just there together, but it's about making sure you pick the appropriate time to communicate with somebody. So many people that I see just want to get something off their chest, and it's something I do an awful lot of within my coaching sessions. And you've just touched on the first part of it there, Emma, about your intention for the meeting. So before you go in and communicate with somebody, what is your intention? So what do you want to get out of it? And it might be a state of mind. I just want to feel heard, or it might be specific points 1, 2, and 3. I need to have them said and heard, or I need action off the back of them. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. What is your intention? Sometimes I've literally had people say to me, I just want to tell them that they've really pissed me off and I'm not happy. Okay. What's your intention? And you delve deeper, because if it's just to offload to someone, maybe we need to work out a better way of doing that and communicating that so you get what you want. But so there's that side of it. And then there's also how do you know you've been successful in that communication? So your success criteria. So there's lots of different things you go through and we can go into more detail. But one of the things at another point, because I could rattle on about this for ages, one of the things that's really important is picking your time and place to have the communication. So like Jackie's saying, there's nothing worse than turning up at someone's desk tapping away. Equally, there's nothing worse than someone turning up at your desk wanting to share everything with you when it's not the right time or place for you. So it's about knowing each other. And it's about being able to say, I haven't got the capacity to do this right now, but when can we find some time? Because I know this is really important to you, but I want to be fully there with you. And right now I'm not, because I've got to get X, Y, and Z done. Is that okay with you? So it's a two-way communication. So everybody walks away feeling like they've been respected and with dignity. So yeah, Jackie, I get that too. I tell you what I wanted to talk about, if you don't mind, Emma. Conflict communication.
Okay.
Because we've touched on that, haven't we, as we're going here? So
yeah, I think we've talked about it in terms of how to avoid getting to the point that there's a conflict, because the conflict comes when communication is not effective.
When it's already broken down. If everybody communicated, if everybody went in and had a strategy from the start and shared their communication strategy and asked to hear somebody else's and then respected each other's boundaries on it and did all these things, then unless someone's just a bit of you'd rarely get into a negative communication, a conflict communication. Yet not many people do those things. We just go in, and what we tend to do, and this is just my experience with people I've worked with and me, I'm not going to pretend to be perfect in this. You go in wanting to be your very best, and you're almost like that, me, on day one, you'll do all these great things. And in doing so, you essentially damage your boundaries. First of all, don't communicate what's okay and what's not okay. Someone else thinks you're always available, so they just do what they want. and it gets into a position where you're resentful and angry, how do you come back from that? That's because I think most people do that. And then you sit there annoyed at the person because they can't read your mind on things. How do you communicate positively? So away from the conflict, without the chaos, back into like a confident, wonderful place. And it takes courage. But that's what I think, because I would say that everybody who's watching this has had experience of that conflict communication. How do you deal with that?
And I think, so talking from my experiences here, if there is the possibility of buying yourself some time to actually process the emotion, so you're not communicating from that emotional state, that's important. Because the first place that we need to look if we're feeling frustrated, resented, as you described it, is actually why. What has got me to the point that I am feeling these emotions? What's that frustration, that resentment actually telling me? Because if it's down to us having boundaries that we've not maintained, actually the first place we need to look is ourselves, because we've let that happen. But actually the conversation then becomes, how do I reset those expectations? And just because you've been working in a certain way doesn't mean it always has to be like that. Because actually, once you're in that spiral, which I think we've talked about earlier today in a different meeting, once you're in that spiral of resentment, frustration, things are only going to get worse unless you have the conversation that is, I've been working this way, it's not serving me, it's not serving us, because blah, 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 blah. Actually, from this point forward, this is really important to me. Do I have support with that?
And how easy did that sound, what you just said there? There weren't any really complex sentences. There weren't any there was no aggression. There was no challenge. There was openness, honesty, and vulnerability, and a solution. And even if you don't know what the answer is, you don't have to go in with all the answers. You can go, I mean, it's always good to know what you want, by the way. I would always advocate knowing what you want, but you don't have to go in and demanding what you want. There's ways to courageously communicate where you say exactly what you've just said, so I won't rehash that, and then ask for what can we do about this? What can we do so that we both feel like we're getting what we need from this situation? Because that matters to me. And if you don't, you won't be sustainable, because the resentment builds and it starts off polite and it starts off like, do you know what? It's not worth mentioning. I'm not going to mention it because I've probably seen something that's not there. And we've definitely talked about this, gaslighting ourselves. So we talk about other people gaslighting us, but we don't often talk about how often we gaslight ourselves. Oh, it doesn't matter. I've imagined it. Do you know what? They didn't mean it like this. So
someone else has it worse. It's not that bad.
And that's another one. Oh, it's not as bad as whoever around the corner. They really get it. That doesn't matter. So we have to stop. Well, first of all, we have to stop doing that. And we have to treat ourselves with kindness. But we have to have the courage to have that conversation in the moment. So not 6 months later. And then, because what will happen is it's like a death by 1,000 cuts. These things happen and they compound up. And then all of a sudden your polite gaslighting, undermining of yourself turns into pure rage or pure emotion, whatever it is that you know, crying, angry, whatever. Or you'll just leave or you'll go off unwell. And then what I often find is we don't give people the opportunity to do the right thing because we think they should be mind readers. So you're annoyed at something, and I actually I did a post on this the other day because it does about this whole about this live that we're doing. We don't communicate, we sulk, we get frustrated, we think they should be mind readers. When they're not, we're even more angry at them. Whereas if we just sat down and explained ourselves and talked about how we felt, then that person probably didn't even realize in the first place, and they could have done something about it. But do you know what always prevents you? Always. It's fear. And it's fear you've made up. I'm not saying all the time, but predominantly you've made it up. Or you've carried it from another time where you tried to express yourself and you were shot down, or it wasn't sort of received in the way that you wanted it. The way I always think it is, every communication that you ever have is an opportunity to learn. So if you see that it's not anything else but an opportunity for you to learn and practice, that sort of demystifies it in the first place. And you're not saying you're going to be perfect in your communication. You're not going to get your words perfectly right, but no one's sat there marking you. They're not grading you on your eloquence or your, you're allowed to be nervous. And you know what? I often think own it up front. Own your awkwardness about something. So I've gone into meetings before and outright said, I should just say from the outset that I feel a little bit uncomfortable having this conversation, but that's all about me and not about you. So I want you to know that first of all, and then go into it. Or say, some people need notes. I've just written a few things down to make sure I stay on track because I respect your time. Whatever it is, but have the conversation. And I don't think I've ever, and I genuinely mean ever, had a time in my own experience or in any of my clients' experience where the act of doing, so the communication, was worse than the fear of doing.
Yeah, if I think back to my corporate career, I can think of times where people exploded. So in that moment, it actually wasn't the right time to have the communication. And this is where I think if you have the opportunity to have a conversation with someone who does not have an agenda in the situation, that is powerful. Someone whose only intention is to hold space for you, to allow you to process your emotions first and actually what you want. That's amazing. And I guess in our work, that's the power of coaching. Clients say to us, this has happened. You can quickly change the energy by us asking some questions that actually make you think, okay, yeah, I'm feeling frustrated and resentment because, and this is what I need. My feelings are valid. I need to process them, but this is what I can do in the situation. So things turn around.
I think that's so powerful what you've said. So create the space and ask the right questions because it's quality questions. And do you know what else I've found really helpful? And this is what I do with my clients, but even in absence of having a coach, writing down how you feel about a situation. Because say if you've come out of something and you're really frustrated and you're like, get it all out, no judgment. Don't try and sort of make it polite or formal, just write. And if it's effing and blind, it doesn't matter. It's your private book. So write it all out. Because what you're writing there, if you don't express it and give it and honor it, give it space, to Jackie's point, will leak out in your face. So you can smile all you want, but if you're thinking, jog on, Luke, because you're mad, that will come out. And if it doesn't come out in your face, it'll come out in your body somewhere. You'll get unwell. You'll feel it in your throat. I often feel things in my throat. So it's about giving yourself an avenue to express what you need to express. And then the other really interesting thing about writing it out is go away, come back and read it. And when you read it, you often go, oh, wow. Because there might be, and please don't anyone get themselves upset when I use this word because nobody likes it. But sometimes when you read it back, you realize that you've absolutely adopted the role of victim in something. And you'll use words like, it's not fair. I feel, all these, because you're so emotionally vested in this. And then when you take it to either, like you're saying, you maybe speak to someone else about it, you then can go, oh, wow, I was maybe a bit too close to this, or I've carried on something from 6 months ago. That's all now, that was over, but I'm still holding on to it. So it's about them being able to come back into it as an adult, an objective adult, and take the emotion away. I don't mean, though, just to be clear, I don't mean don't have emotion, because I think emotion is really important, but it's an emotion that you can manage in your own way, and you can communicate it in a way where you can say, I'm hurt, but without screaming, I'm hurt, because then nobody wants to be on the receiving end of somebody screaming either. I'm not saying you can't ever show emotion, but I think creating space is really important.
Yeah, because it might be you then, from the benefit of having the space, intentionally decide to bring some emotion to the conversation so that the person you're having the communication with sees how much something's affected you. That can be powerful, but the difference is you're in control of that. You've decided to share that rather than it's been an eruption
that's out of you. Yeah. And that's different, isn't it?
Do as you intended.
Yeah, because I also think to be on the receiving end of someone screaming or shouting isn't conducive to a healthy conversation. So that I know, and I speak from experience here, I'm an emotive person. So I have to create space. So if I'm upset, I would rather walk away from a situation and say, I need some distance from this so I can come back and deal with it in the right way. So, but it's about knowing yourself. It's about knowing your triggers and knowing how you communicate under pressure, because that's another interesting thing with conflict communication. If you go into something and you're already worked up and already angry, you might not communicate for your best intentions, and you might say something you can't take back. I'm going to I don't know, by the way, if these, Karen, I don't know if these comments are for us.
No, this is chat between people in the chat. We're good.
Oh, right. I was like, I'm not sure how to
we've
change.
talked to everything in the chat.
Oh, right, fine. I was like, is that Karen speaking to us or?
No.
Brilliant. Getting very confused there. I don't know. Yes, that is everything. Sorry, that took me off track there because I didn't want to miss something somebody was asking us. Let me think, because there's always more on conflict communication, and I'm sorry that I'm harping on about that one, but I think it's the bit where we can really add value. And if anyone who's listening has anything that they want to ask or suggest or ask or comment, do so. But I'm just trying to think from our experiences. We've talked about the fear of communication. We've talked about fear being often, I say made up, but I just mean it's inflated in our head. It's the fear of something is often worse than the actual doing of it. Oh, sorry. And I've just seen Jackie, so I just want to put Jackie's. Jackie, so perfect. I'm sure. So what Jackie's saying there, and I've got an example of when I learned this, and I worked at the Leeds Building Society, and somebody said to me, what you need to do, Cheryl, and I do it now to this day, is, so you get an email in, and because I'm a fiery, like, what did they say? I used to, this is like me in my 20s, by the way, type back and press send and then live afterwards going, do you know what? Either I misread it or it wasn't that big a deal. I've gone and had a sandwich and I feel better now. And then you can unsend emails, but not always. So what I do now is I don't put the name in the to box. So I wouldn't put Emma Matthews in. I'd leave it blank. Type my email, press save. So with all my aggression, save instead of send, and then go for a walk.
Yeah, and that's a perfect example actually of something that I love the concept of how we can complete the cycle on an emotion. So an emotion comes up and actually the writing process is really therapeutic. It enables us to get it out, going for a walk, and then suddenly you come back, you've completed the cycle on an emotion, and suddenly there's no need to be snarky in the email or whatever else is coming up.
Word snarky. I love snarky. But actually, and I completely agree with that, because one, I do it myself, Jackie's right, you're right. Then there are those times, and this is important with communication, and comes back to the gaslighting, where you come back and you go, do you know what? It wasn't that, what I was reading. But you have to honour the way you felt. Something pressed your button, whether it was actually that person or something it's connected to. And if it was just a pure, you misread it, fair enough. But the fact that you didn't even give something an opportunity to go, I must have read this wrong. You jumped straight to it. There's something that needs exploring there, I think. And one of the questions I often ask myself to be able to get closer to that detail is, when have I felt this? Well, first of all, how do I feel? So if it's snarky, annoyed, whatever it is, what was it about this email that made me feel like it? Well, it's that line there. I hated that bit. When's the earliest time I can remember feeling this way? Because all of a sudden something will ping up, and it might even be, do you know what? When I was 6, my mum said, I'm just making something up, blah. And then you go, oh, so actually this person's about to get double barrels from me, because this takes me back to a conversation I had where I felt, not listened to or not important enough. There's always a root cause, and what we spend our whole life, and this is what we do as coaches, so we know this is our way of doing things, but what we often do is we fix the effect, not the cause, and we just put plasters. And so anybody who's watching this, if you keep having the same scenario in your life, different day, different people, different circumstances maybe, but the same thing happens to you, repeat patterns, pay attention. because there's something in that where your brain's going, I'm trying to communicate with you. Your body's saying, I'm trying to communicate with you. We need to learn something. We need to try a different approach. And you're not. Your body's screaming to be heard. And that's when you go back and you actually look at that thing again in different eyes with someone that can help you, whatever. But if you don't, you'll keep getting the same problem. So another level of communication, your own body communicating with you.
Oh, that's huge. That's a whole session in itself.
We could touch on that for hours.
Yeah. And what came up for me?
Where do you feel that in your body?
Yeah. And if you can't get to the answer using your conscious mind, that's where I love using hypnotherapy, because subconsciously, it could be that something that happened in early childhood is actually impacting how you act as an adult again.
It always is.
It could be a session in itself.
And you know what? On that note, I've realised that it's 8:30, and actually just because you and I were chatting to ourselves for 10 minutes doesn't mean everyone else has got 10 minutes to catch up with us. So if everyone's got to dive off, because I think that's Karen signing out. If people have, again, apologies that we missed you for the first 10 minutes, and thank you for sticking with us and flagging it to us. So that was really helpful. I never knew you could get the comments even before you'd gone live. So that's
anyway, we learned
learning. That's what I was saying. Always learning. That was really beneficial. And the other thing that I was going to say, just on this communication piece, is in these lives that we do, we touch on, I would say, quite a high level, the surface level of these things. So we talk about the theory of things and the consequences, how it feels, the impact, and some solutions that you can pick up. But there's look at that, Karen. Sorry. Thank you, Karen. She's not dialing out yet. But we've talked about the high level theory and some practical tips that you could do, and we hope they're helpful. But what we really want to be able to do is reach you on a deeper and a more impactful level. So if there's anything anybody wants any support with, or if you go, you talked about X and Y, can you explore that more for us? Just give us a shout. You've got both of our DMs. You can send us messages, and that helps us create more content for you moving forward. That's relevant. So communicate with us.
Absolutely. And if you're, I don't know, a leader in a business, you listen to this and think, actually, we've got some communication challenges in our team. Again, let us know. There's so many different exercises that we can do, kind of reviews of the situation, recommendations, possibilities are endless, but you know how to reach us.
And the only thing I was going to just say on top of that is, often I don't think people know it's a communication issue that they've got, or a boundary issue that they've got, or they just know it doesn't feel right. And I think one of the key things to know you've got a communication issue is you're not getting what you want. So as a leader, if you're asking for things, or whatever it is you're doing, it doesn't quite align, you've got a communication issue. You just might not badge it up as one. And you may badge it up as, my staff don't get me, they don't understand what their job is. Whatever way you want to, and I don't mind triggering people here, but whatever way you so far have helped yourself sleep at night, that's okay. But from here onwards, eyes wide open, you've got a communication issue. And that's what we're here to help with. And the sooner people accept that, ask for help, move forward, the sooner you'll start getting what you want on time, delivering on time, because you know how to communicate with each other.
Yeah. And a lot of this stuff isn't particularly complex to implement. It's just when you're in a world of there's so much going on, everyone's feeling overwhelmed, having someone come in and just do that step back, see what's going on, make some recommendations. It's amazing. During my time in the corporate world, I brought people in so many times just to get that independent view of what's going on, because we only see what we see in the context of our experience and how things have been done.
Absolutely. So we're here. Give us a shout. So on that note, we will let you go because it's 20:34 now. Thank you again. And we'll be here next week at some point. We'll let you all know.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Cheryl. Thanks, everyone. Bye. Thanks, Emma.